Hey, everybody. So we're back now to talk about two more women that I really wanted to spend a little time um, discussing in terms of not only their contributions, but also their historical legacy. One of those women is Sojourner Truth, who, for many of you who know Sojourner Truth, it is not her actual birth or given name. Her given name is Isabella Bumfree. She was born a slave in New York and actually escaped in 1826, right before her official freedom would have been granted 1 year later in 1827 when the state of New York banned slavery. Well, Sojourner Truth wasn't that patient, and she escaped, leaving behind her family, her children. But interestingly enough, she was the first Black woman to successfully challenge a white man in court and actually win. We'll talk a little bit about what that was about. Um, Upon her escape, she changed her name to Sojourner. She said, "The Lord named me Sojourner Truth because I want to declare the truth for the people." She became a well-known abolitionist. Upon her escape, she later found that New York had freed the slaves. However, her son was sold into slavery by the slave master that owned her and her family. So her son was illegally sold because New York had banned slavery. So that is the basis by which she was able to sue in court and actually regain custody of her son. She is well known for her powerful speeches. She traveled throughout the North speaking about the experience of slavery and its impact on people. And I definitely wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to hear her very famous Ain't I a Woman speech that is linked right after this discussion. You will see that speech being read by a very famous actress, Cicely Tyson. So please make sure you listen to Ain't I a Woman by Sojourner Truth and reflect on what she is saying. It's a question that I want you to think about a little later, which is, how do you think the experiences of Black and white women shaped their understanding of social justice and their understanding of the abolitionist movement, but also thinking about how you think it starts to shape their understanding of feminism and a woman's movement and what that would look like and how it would be different for women of different races. So again, you'll be watching this clip right here, C-SPAN video clip on Sojourner Truth immediately following this little mini lecture here. I also want to talk a little bit about Prudence Crandall, another abolitionist, Quaker, who we talked about previously in high opposition to slavery. Prudence Crandall was an abolitionist and a teacher, and she really defied discrimination when she opened up one of the first schools for African American girls in Connecticut in 1833. It was called the Canterbury Female Boarding School. This was initially a school for white girls, and she started to allow Black girls to attend the school. Well, once the parents of the white children saw Black children going to the school, there was a complete exodus, and there were no more white children at the school. So she converted her school to a school for Black children. Just historical background there, in 1834, Connecticut had passed the Black Law. This was a law that stipulated that schools could not teach African Americans from outside the state of Connecticut. So she was arrested for violating the law, but the case was overturned. The thing about Crandall's experience and her story was she illustrates the difficulty that women dealt with as they attempted to bring about social change in forms such as educating Black youth. She faced continued harassment. Her school was attacked by violent mobs. It was eventually destroyed in a fire. The safety of her students was constantly at risk, and so she eventually had to completely close the doors of the school out of fear for her own life, but also the lives of her students. So you will have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Prudence Crandall and her story as well. There is another clip that is attached at the end of this brief audio lecture that will tell you a little bit more about her story and the school for girls that she started. So as we move through this discussion, and I would just like to say that we are talking just a little bit today in an introductory way about some of the women that were involved in the abolitionist movement. We are going to continue our discussion into next week talking about some of the ways in which women were engaged in the abolitionist movement in terms of their activism in the civil war, which eventually led to the eradication of slavery. We'll talk about their roles as soldiers, their roles as nurses, their roles as spies, oftentimes a history that we don't know much about when we think about women and social change. But up to this point, we've had an opportunity to reflect a little bit on some key women and the ways in which they participated through writing, through speaking, through starting schools. So I want you to reflect a little bit on the different strategies that were used by women. And again, as you do your readings and as you're watching the documentary, take notes of the ways in which you see women entering into this very important social change movement. But also I want you to think about issues of race as we think about the experiences of Black and white women, how you think race and their experiences shape their understanding of abolition, of social change, and why it's needed, but also thinking about how you anticipate this is going to continue to be something that we have to discuss as we move into other forms of social change in our society. For example, as we start talking about prohibition and the temperance movement, and the ways in which we start to see Black and white women, although having the same interests, seeing their interests move in different ways when issues of race come into play. Also, similarly, when we talk about the suffrage movement and the movement to have women gain the right to vote, in what ways do we see women on the same page, but oftentimes moving in different directions when we take into consideration race and ethnicity? And this will be a big theme. And as we start to bring in the life stories and the experiences of immigrant women, Mexican American women in the United States, Native American women, as we move into ways in which we can think of that as part of this larger story of social change as well. So we're constantly going to try to be mindful of the ways in which, as I call it, commonality and difference always speak to this history and these stories that we tell. So again, don't forget to watch The Abolitionist. The whole first part, please. I think you'll find it really interesting, and feel free to watch all 3 parts. Make sure you take a look at all the embedded video clips. You'll be hearing from some amazing women. And again, keep in mind that this is going to be a continuous lecture over the next couple of days into the next week. So as you see the next module posting, feel free to just go ahead and jump in. As of today, I'm not posting a discussion board for you, but am asking that you think about these questions that I've asked you to reflect on, as it will be a big part of our discussion over the next week. Thank you.